Hello, allies. It is Monday, June 8th, and this is your Cup of Jones. Cheers. Have it with me this time. A little less sleepy today. Still sleepy. It's very windy in Southern California today, so hoping the internet stays on and the power stays on. Apologies if something ends abruptly on this episode of Cup of Jones. It's just extremely windy, and there's all sorts of weather that rolls through Southern California, but for some reason in my neighborhood, when it gets really windy, that means the power is going to go out. And so our power was here and there and everywhere last night. Sometimes it was here, sometimes it was there, and it has gone out one time this morning, so knock on wood, we were able to do this Cup of Jones smoothly. Hi, everybody. So last week, I definitely want to thank, I don't know specifically of the people that are watching this episode of Cup of Jones or listen or watch Cup of Jones regularly, and the people that tuned in for our group streaming last Tuesday. We did a 4-hour fundraiser. We ended up giving over $25,000 to the George Floyd Memorial Foundation, and just want to say thank you for making all of that happen. We do fundraisers every now and then. I wish we could do a fundraiser all the time, kind of similar to how we have initiatives where we bring in money for purposes of Easy Allies, for equipment that we want to buy or an event that we want to produce. We don't want to do stuff like that all the time. You know, when I start to get messages from people that are like, hey, I've noticed you haven't done a fundraiser in a little while. I think that's something, hey, Blood, YouTube didn't start while I was in the other tab. Oh, well, welcome. It's tough to know how many fundraisers we can do a year. I think that answer is probably no more than like 3. I think 2 is probably a good amount. One at the beginning of the year, one at the end. It definitely feels like a seasonal thing, and it's something where I feel bad because we were all legitimately surprised that we were getting the numbers that we were getting for those of you that tuned in on Tuesday night. But at the same time, of course, why should I be surprised? Because it's that same kind of energy and enthusiasm that built Easy Allies, that enabled us to do, brought us all the equipment that we're still using for our multi-camera setups in the studio, made the studio itself happen, have come forward for, to help relieve Australia during the horrible wildfires. And a lot of that stuff is still either going on or stuff is still, constantly threatened. And so it feels absolutely incredible to just have a part in all of this stuff that's going on. And so, as I stated when we were streaming live, thank you. It was like an honor to raise that much money. And it will come up again because there's just generally a lot of people talking about the stuff that I talked about last week. Certainly between the last Cup of Jones and this Cup of Jones, I saw some comments on Patreon that were like, he didn't discuss this thing. And it's like, well, that happened 15 minutes after that episode of Cup of Jones. Probably one of the most eventful 2 weeks in 2020, I think, so far. For the world, for the gaming industry, a lot of things shifting, a lot of things moving, a lot of stuff planned that was going to happen last week that is not going to happen later. Speaking of, our weekend reactions that we were planning on doing. So we had a big day that was stacked for last Saturday. Thankfully, a lot of the conversations that we were having around racial inequality continued, throughout the week and are continuing this week. And so did not seem like the time for Sony to talk about new games, did not seem like a time for the 3 events we were going to look at on Saturday. We still don't have a date over from when Sony is going to reschedule their thing, but we know that this Saturday is going to look a lot like what last Saturday looked like. And I was planning on doing my community island hop. I thought about other days we could do that this week. We do have other shoots and stuff planned. So right now I don't have any plans to do island hop this week as well. It seems brutal to put that off for 2 weeks because that brings joy to a lot of people. That brings joy to myself more than anyone. But it's just, this would be E3 week. Pour one out for E3. E3 is not a thing that's happening this week. It usually does, but so there's lots of people that are planning events. There's lots of fun stuff that we will be able to get to do reactions to, but just kind of focused on that. Am trying to review a game. I don't know if that'll happen. I have not had a lot of time to play it. It is a game you have to think about while you're playing. It's not something I can just kind of jump around like Minecraft Dungeons. But so I don't know if I'll get that done on time. But I do have a lot of. Did you want to finish up that Dreams level? I do have a lot of things that I'm focusing on. I certainly don't mind just focusing on my own island in Animal Crossing for a week. Last week, along with doing the fundraiser at GameSpot, the fundraiser at Easy Allies for the George Floyd Memorial Fund, I was also in GameSpot with MinMax. So there's a lot of parties involved. But thanks to Ben Hansen, he was involved in an ongoing fundraiser that GameSpot has been doing. That I told them they can put me anywhere they want me in that lineup that they are doing. Not exactly sure how much they are streaming per day. I was supposed to be on Tuesday around the same time we pushed back our stream team to later in the week, and decided basically because we weren't sure whether we wanted to be proactive and stream last Tuesday or whether we wanted to go offline. We kind of did a little bit of both. We delayed some things, but then doubled down on our group stream. And then that same day, which ended up being that Thursday, I played some trivia better than I thought I was going to with MinMax. So that was a spot that MinMax took in the GameSpot fundraising lineup that week that I was then a part of, along with Blessing from Kind of Funny and some other fun people, Jake from Game Ranks. And so that was very fun getting together with a different crowd. And obviously we had a fun time, a very gratifying time raising money and getting donations, but also a fun time doing trivia, but a fun time just checking in with those folks, because I get to see them once or twice a year, and I almost know all of them. But again, it's such quick conversations that you have when it's a Judges Week or an E3 or a PAX or something. You just see people in the hallway and like, Jake, right, there goes Jake. And I hadn't talked to Blessing at all before. I haven't ever since he came on. It's Kind of Funny, or had no connection with him through the stuff that he had already done there. And so all these people, yay, finally get to meeting them. I feel somewhat kind of like we're being social. Had somewhat of another social time with the folks this weekend, with practicing our social distancing, but like trying to get my mom around someone in the general vicinity of Milo as much as possible. But that was very fun, and a lot of people showed up for that. Definitely saw some allies. I'm not sure what to do when I recognize an ally's name when they donate something when I'm on another channel. So like Jesper Lawson, I think, showed up, and I was like, yeah, or like Tim O'Keefe, and somebody, there was like 2 or 3 people that I'm like, yeah, I know that name. I read that name in the podcast credits, but I don't want to like interrupt Ben and be like, love and respect, woo! And people be like, wait, what? And just like, no, that's a thing that we do. Like, love and respect, what are you talking about? And just like, they're paid. Sorry. I didn't want to suggest that those people were better than the other people that donated. So I don't know if just a like wink from me is enough if you can see my camera, but Banjo-Kazooie ups and downs was a highlight. Thank you, Brad. And yeah, it's usually E3 week. Like I said, stuff that was happening last week is happening again this week. Hopefully, fingers crossed. And some people reached out to me. I've lumped them all up in a little editorial category. And we are still, obviously it takes a long time for the math to add everything up at the beginning of the month. But we are currently below 40K on Patreon. Our Patreon total numbers, meaning total number of patrons, has dropped as well. And I generally want to talk about that. I just kind of want to talk about, because I think there's a lot of, one of the things that is a concern with people is like, where is Easy Allies going? And Easy Allies is definitely very reactionary to a lot of the things that are going on right now. We are not necessarily driving the narrative in terms of what we are waiting to react to. We're waiting to react to how this world is changing. We're waiting to react to two new consoles coming out. We're waiting to react to the big announcements in E3 that is turned into a bunch of different tiny shows, and we're all kind of like floating around those. And so not a great time, I think, to really sell people on specifically what the Patreon means and where the Patreon is going, because times they be uncertain right now. And so I want to talk about that a little bit more. Let's talk about that in the editorial. But before we do that, let's look at our schedule. You'll notice I'm not freaking out. I'm pretty calm about considering all of the stuff that's going on. I think, judging by whatever was happening to a lot of other people that I saw, whether people that I am connected to through this community or people that I know in person or have worked with or do work with, but a lot of people are grateful they have jobs in this time. And, so I am first and foremost grateful that I still have this job, grateful that I'm still able to work with Easy Allies. And so when I look at the Easy Allies total, it's like, I can, no matter what that number is, like I can work with that. We can make that grow. We can make anything a priority if we choose to. Here's what we've decided to make a priority for the month of June 8th to June 15th. Cup of Jones, which you don't have to make a priority of for maybe another hour. And then I'll be done with this. Frame Trap happens today. Forgot to say I was on Frame Trap the last time Frame Trap was on. I was like, oh, look at that, an episode of Frame Trap. Completely forgetting that I was on that episode. I was not on this episode of Frame Trap. Tomorrow night, Space Dwarves, our regular group stream. Our non-fundraiser 2-hour version of the group stream. I don't know if I think we're playing that on PC. I don't know if I'm going to be joining that 4-player co-op Space Dwarf crew. But we're going to be checking that out. That seemed pretty much like a no-brainer for the crew. Wednesday at 11, Ben's Dojo, switching over to Mortal Kombat 11. And then Portal 2 will be up for Stream Team, which I started and never finished. Puzzle games can make Jonesy feel dumb every now and then. But what's Blood talking about? We'll wait for a formal announcement. There's several days to go. It could be a placeholder that gets pushed again. Jones PS5 on the 11th? Okay. It sounds like that's a placeholder. We'll see. Stay tuned. EasyAllies.com for a schedule in your local time zone. Blah, blah, blah. Dinosaur Fossil Hunter will be the new game on Wednesday night for Ian and Don. Sounds like they have finished Deadly Premonition. Good to know that game is a game that you can at least figure out when you are getting close to finishing it. Huber Syndrome will be back on Thursday. Persona 5 Royal continues on Thursday along with weekly hunts. Easy Allies podcast is this weekend, but before everybody gets the Easy Allies podcast on Sunday, we're going to do 3 reactions if all of this holds, which is the Guerrilla Collective reactions hosted by Greg Miller, PC Gaming Show, and the Future Games Show. And I am just excited to talk about potential new games, not as a form of escapism, not as, to take my mind off other things, but the little taste that we got of it when Summer Games Fest started, I'm definitely hungry. I definitely want to devour more. And then Bradley Ellis, because he just can't stop playing Zelda games, continuing Ocarina of Time, Sunday at 1. So a lot of purple on that screen. A lot of live stuff you can check out this week, and lots of reactions. Saturday's going to be a busy day. It'll be interesting to see all of the allies that show up. We're going to cram that. We're all going to be so tiny in our little boxes. We're going to cram that screen as tall as we can with little tiny cameras on the side there. Really make it challenging for Michael Damiani. What is the Future Game Show? I don't know. What was the Wholesome Games Direct going to be like? I don't know. There's a lot of new things. There's a lot of stuff that people have planned. GameSpot's got some other crazy things planned. IGN's got some crazy things planned. SGF, all these individual companies, EA Play. A lot of stuff getting delayed. Stay tuned as our schedule changes throughout the week, as we obviously want to react to as much of this stuff as possible. But let's get into specific business questions. Brandon K. Gann, inspired by current events in your most recent editorial, does Easy Allies have any regrets? Any statement made you wish you could rework, a statement you wish was made, or perhaps content which Easy A never made? No, because we learned from things, so I don't know if we learn a lesson and take content away, I guess maybe we could do that. I think the number one thing that I regret is that we always don't promote things as well as we should. I think that's the number one thing that I regret, which might not be factoring into the juicy regrets maybe that you're looking for, Brandon K. Gann. But that's something that I always get frustrated after the fact, because I'm much more of a content producer, even though I enjoy being nicknamed brand manager. I'm definitely focused more, as is my job. I wish my job was just to sell Easy Allies. That'd be great. I didn't have to make anything. I could just be like, Easy Allies, everybody! Easy Allies, come right this way! Right through these curtains. Check out those Easy Allies there. And I wasn't like, I got Showcase tomorrow. I got a lot of videos to put together. But many, many times, right when we finished something, I was like, that went really well. And then I'll get a tweet from somebody or a message from somebody on Patreon. They're like, you didn't even tweet that out, or should have made a YouTube video promoting that. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Sorry. It's just working on the thing, trying to make the thing happen, and didn't really, and I think a lot of that has to do with, speaking of E3, this was E3 week. Thinking back to game trailers when we had, 20, 30 people teams working on a project, just so many people involved. You had one person that was just involved with like renting cars that we were going to, like a car service we were going to use to pick up tapes from appointments, one person managing all the folders that were coming in, one person managing all the editors themselves who were cutting things, all the guys going out and getting interviews and getting game footage, a whole separate crew just going around and shooting TVs, and all of them would meet, 20 to 30 people would meet around a giant conference table and all figure out what we were going to do days and days and days beforehand, versus us being like, everybody know what we're doing? Okay, go. And so like some stuff just falls by the wayside because smaller team, all of us focused on one, couple big things. And of course, content is king when you are a group like us that just makes so much content. So I think just, getting the word out in the absolute best way possible is the thing I'm always like Almost had it. Benjamin Schultz. One question regarding the taxable benefits from the Patreon. This is one of those things that was asked and answered, but I thought I would include all of you because Bloodworth mentioned it, and Bloodworth tends to word these things much better than I ever could, and answers a question potentially some of you might have. What does Easy Allies consider the taxable benefit of early access to shows/exclusive shows? I always considered that to be a perk of contributing to the Patreon and not the purpose of the contribution. My personal take is that our contributions are really donations and shouldn't be taxed since you don't monetize the exclusive content and therefore don't profit off of it. Yes, it would be wonderful if the IRS felt the way that you do, or all the people out there getting those tax monies. But yes, it doesn't always factor in specifically to everything, to all of how Patreon works. But even if it just factors into a little bit of it, it needs to be considered. I would gladly give it a level that did not provide taxable benefits if that was the only choice to avoid excessive taxation. I know a couple of cents here and there isn't a big loss to many, but I would rather not give any additional money to taxes considering the current state of how some of our tax-supported entities interface with the people they're supposed to be serving. A lot going on there. Bloodworth adds, we don't determine how something gets taxed, but just try to determine how much each benefit matters to each tier based on predefined categories Patreon has set up that align with those various tax laws. Doesn't that sound like a really fun thing to manage? General support, which is not taxable, is always the largest piece of the pie, but every tier includes something taxable, such as exclusive episodes, like Cup of Jones. I'm taxing you right now, folks, I'm sorry, and audio downloads. The only way to avoid taxes entirely would be to give us your support without choosing any of the reward tiers. So again, all of this is flexible, and this kind of factors into stuff we'll talk about in the editorial, but just like lots of these changes are happening to our world right now. A lot of reasons where, you know, I would imagine people are like, I have a problem with taxes, therefore I'm going to lower my pledge. I don't have a job, therefore I have to lower my pledge. I don't like the way you guys have taken political stances, therefore I have to lower my pledge. Lots of potential reasons why people would be reevaluating that. And I think a lot of this stuff has to go through a process of us seeing how big of a reaction it gets from our community, and you, the community, deciding what that reaction is going to be. And we only get to experience that once a month. So it's tricky to decide what these giant Patreon changes, you know, mean for our business, how they are affecting patreon.com, and without looking in a couple months, being like, oh, that's what happened. Good to know. Bandana Boy, Mr. Jones, coincidentally also the title of an awesome Talking Head song. Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones is back! Drinking cool beer. Yeah, man. That song, that's my favorite Mr. Jones song. That song destroys the Counting Crow song. Because the Counting Crow song is like, it's like, oh, there's that guy, Mr. Jones, and he likes girls like him more, I guess, than other people. Not really sure the relationship between the singer and the Mr. Jones in that song. Whereas the Mr. Jones in the Talking Head song is ready for action. I want to, if I'm ever in like a poker tournament and we get intro songs, that's going to be my song. Ba-da-ba! Mr. Jones! It's a really good song. I remember the first time I heard it, I was beside myself. I was like, this is the Mr. Jones song. Sorry, Counting Crows, you had your chance. With the state of California reopening, what does this mean for the Allies? Where do you feel your group exists among the 4 phases of reopening? If you have no idea or don't feel comfortable saying yet, then that's fine, simply curious. If all that comes up from you reading my question is more people listening to the groovy genius of the Talking Heads, then I'm grateful for you acknowledging this question. Mr. Jones? No idea. I think a vaccine, for me, would answer a lot of questions in terms of how comfortable I would be going to an office, how comfortable I would be traveling. Amanda's parents are in Florida, so that raises the question of like, they would love to come into town and see Milo, and we can make that happen with living arrangements and social distancing, but they'd have to get on a plane. They'd have to go to an airport and get on a plane to another airport. They get in a car. It's just a lot of question marks there. We absolutely don't want to say anything definitive. We're still waiting for those phases to be enacted. Inside of that is a company of 8 different people who all have their own ideas about how they could benefit from using the studio again and what safety measures they would want to have employed based on what shows that they are doing. Ultimately, for me, it's the podcast. As the producer of the podcast, having 4 of us sitting together at the same desk is like, Yikes. That's probably a ways off. So yeah, I'm not jumping up and down on my chair for those changes to happen within Easy Allies soon. So sorry. But I would have to, like you mentioned the 4 phases, all of those 4 phases are contingent on seeing what happened with the last phase. And if you look at a lot of the new cases, a lot of the charts in LA, I mean, it's skyrocketing, just going up and up and up and up. Parasite Paladin, I know you want to keep EZA free of anything political or avoid talking about anything that can be a major downer since you are a gaming group, and that isn't what you do. Sure, it makes people uncomfortable, and you are saving, only for Cup of Jones, we really get into the uncomfortable stuff, and you're saving a lot of people trying to avoid it by having fun with EZA. And that is what I always thought, but I just sadly realized that avoiding stuff, are you attracting a bad crowd? I knew he was in with a bad crowd. And by attract, I suppose I mean not pushing the bad crowd away. You are a bunch of mostly straight and white men. While everybody knows you are nice dudes that hate racism and homophobia and the like, you don't speak up often to remind people how the bad dudes are. Ian and Damiani speak their mind against bullshit publicly more than the others, allies from what I can tell. I would say that's maybe Huber and definitely Ben. Blood and I do not speak up a lot, admittedly. And from what is very obvious for all the speaking that I do, Ian and Damiani receive the most hate from shitty trolls. Not saying these two things are related, but they might be. And what if all the allies spoke up like they did? How would the trolls make shitty comments on every video that EZA makes? Or would they finally just give up and stop watching EZA because they know they are not welcome? Again, I know you guys say you cover games and want to be an escape from it all, but you have to do something a little different. Sorry for the ranting. I saw some unfortunate replies to the EZA tweet and couldn't hold it in any longer. Yeah, what you're describing would be disingenuous to how the Easy Allies want to react to things. The opinions that you see expressed by Easy Allies that aren't signed by any one particular person are all agreed on by all of the allies that cared to vote. You know, whenever we, obviously when we have our fundraiser, when we're sending these tweets out, all of this stuff is stuff that needs to be reacted upon by the different allies. And then we all have our individual shows and our opportunities via streaming and whatnot to communicate directly with our audience. And so then you get a sense of, oh, okay, that's, Ian's direct take on that. That might be how Bloodworth feels about that. And again, as is evidenced by the last couple of weeks, silence it sometimes can speak as much as actually saying something. So you're seeing how much everybody wants to be involved in that conversation, wants to check in with our community as much as possible. And I've always felt that there is not a pushing away of people, but generally we don't court controversy too much here at Easy Allies. Not only with the kind of topics that we choose to discuss, but the way that we choose to discuss them, I think in a generally angry way is something that I see that I compare ourselves to a lot of other entities that exist in gaming, a lot of other people that I see online. It's weird because talking has become such a big deal. I have an okay microphone, but I don't have the best mic. I just have a simple Logitech mic or a simple Logitech camera, just a little webcam. And I just see now this is what everybody's job now. This is like what everybody does now is they talk at home. And I notice some people like, okay, that's more of kind of like a news centered person. That's not necessarily what we do. And, oh, that person focuses on being really angry a lot of the times. That's not necessarily what we do. We tend to have a calmness about us that I don't think that I can definitely pick people on the internet that don't act that way. And I think that goes a long way to kind of silencing people because they get a sense that their comments aren't necessarily going to do a whole lot. Their comments aren't really going to light us up. We don't call out a lot of that stuff. We address a lot of that in text and directly, via comments on YouTube and comments on our Patreon. We have had some people that might have said something that disagree with us. More specifically, we would have issues with people that wouldn't be nice while they're expressing their opinions. Their opinions are one thing, but it's just generally how they express that stuff. So we have gotten into it with some people that, again, I'm not going to call them like the bad crowd, just people that it is difficult to communicate with or do not communicate in a way that we would like people to communicate with each other on our forums, on the things that we create, whether they're on our website or comments on our videos or, posts made by our wonderful patrons here on Patreon. but to answer your question specifically, Parasite Paladin, you're basically seeing everybody do what they want to do. So if you're like, what if all of the allies spoke up like Ian and Damiani, then they wouldn't be themselves. That wouldn't be the way I like to talk about things. That would be me just, it's kind of like taking over the podcast. I don't want to host the podcast as Kyle. And so I want to host it as me. And so I see a lot of comments on YouTube. People are like, he's not funny like Kyle. It's like, I'm not. Definitely not. You know, Kyle doesn't have the voice that I do. I got to leverage that somehow to make up for the lack of humor that Kyle had. You know, it's like we all gotta focus on our strengths. We all gotta do what we believe in. This last week has been a really interesting test. It's been educational for me to have a powwow with these allies and figure out where are we? Where are we? Do we think about all of this stuff? Where are we in terms of what we want the company to be? It's always good to kind of reaffirm our mission statement. And so, again, I have no regrets over how essentially we've handled this as a company this last week. There was a lot to learn, but I liked what we did. And I certainly want to give each of the allies freedom to do what we want to do. So I think we're a little bit too boring for a lot of trolls to really invest heavily in what we do. I don't think they get as satisfying as a reaction as they get other places. I think our mods are really strong and smart and are learning as fast, if not faster than we are about a lot of this stuff. So that said, it's not a challenge. I'm not asking people to come in and like, all right, I'll give you trolling like you've never seen trolling before. Kitsuna Lane, is the studio a safe place from all the rioting? I'd imagine that it must have you pretty concerned. It does not. The one thing for those of you that do not live in Los Angeles, for those of you that have never been to Los Angeles, I need to paint a picture of Los Angeles for you. Los Angeles is humongous. It's really, really, really big. Don't just play GTA 5. If you play GTA 5, that's like a district of Los Angeles. Take GTA 5 times 50, and you have like the heart of LA County. Then not to mention, Hollywood, all that stuff going on up there. Where I grew up, south of, not to mention Long Beach and all these areas around that have nothing to do with the West Side. So the way, the protests happened this week, it's in Beverly Hills, it's downtown, it's on the freeway. It was near where I am on the West Side one day, and then it moved somewhere else. You're hearing, I'm hearing sirens, going north to south, east to west, helicopters circling. So it's all over the place. So it's never really centralized in one place that I feel would make the studios just in a place. It's not really effective place, I guess, to stage a protest. Also, a lot of the big glass front shops were really the things that were very easily take advantage of. You can just go up and break glass and go in. And so a lot of people were boarding, going around running errands this last week. It was definitely eye-opening to see what places decided to board up and just kind of tracing what would be the common place to have a protest based on where I had seen those things happen. But pretty concerned, not so much. We do have security. We do have insurance. We do have, we got cameras. We can keep an eye on the studio. And I've stopped by. Haven't stopped by, I think, since the protest started. So I have driven by the area. I've seen the outside of the studio, but I have not stopped by. So not too concerned. Jesse Blue, may I suggest a couple more shout-out tier slots just to see if someone else is interested in filling the gap? Just a thought. We always have, Jesse Blue, and very kind of you to be at that tier for so long and to suggest to our other patrons, hey, water's fine. Come on in. There was this thought that we had also back in the day when we were doing just regular sponsorship through our Patreon for our podcasts and how those functioned and how many more we wanted to add. That number is always fluctuating in our brains. That's something that we always think of going up or down, but we will add a little Jesse Blue opinion. I'll tack that on there next time we think about it. Dine Wen, I was thinking of accessibility on live streams. I recently found out about this web browser app that in real time adds captions to your speech. I thought this might be a neat idea for live streams for people who are hard of hearing or just like reading. The program is called Web Captioner if you're interested. Cool, we'll check it out. There's a lot of cool live tech that we check out that isn't necessarily working 100% or doesn't really do what we want it to, but I'll put that on the list of fun tech to check out. All right, Jared Barzy with a big comment. I honestly feel like Easy Allies doing a daily show akin to Kinda Funny Games Daily would be incredibly beneficial and something the community would really respond to. It can maybe start 3 days a week and then potentially turn into a full Monday through Friday show. A few reasons why. I'll read all of these before I comment on this. You could have a 2-person co-host approach and get different combinations with the allies who are willing to do it. This would allow those who don't normally get hosting duties a chance to experience this. Brad comes to mind, without having to be the host the entire time. Hear that, Brad? Are you listening, Brad? Who knows, maybe this could turn into a starting point for one of the allies to do new things and create their own show down the line. This format could target being a little shorter than the Easy A podcast, somewhere between 40 to 50 minutes depending on the news topics of the day. This isn't just strictly news and community questions. An example on a recent Kinda Funny Games Daily had the headline, "How big is too big for an open world game?" So to me, this could create an opportunity to get more interesting topics from multiple allies and have a discussion. This type of format could allow for a discussion where opinions can be discussed and even debate in some cases. So some discussing is happening. I love the idea of getting certain allies paired up on a given day with that, and having them challenge each other's opinions on some topics. I believe Kinda Funny Games Daily is the blueprint you could easily follow here while still putting your own spin on it. Blood makes a good point. If anybody wants to jump in on the shout-out tier, let us know. Easier to open more if we know there's a taker. This format will create a lot of interesting conversations and push the co-hosts to give their show on that particular day an identity based on the topic they've brought to the table. The whole concept seems exciting because I think different combos of the allies and guests could be a lot of fun. This would allow more folks who submit to love and respect and don't get their question read on the weekly podcast a chance to interact with you all, even if the subsequent discussion isn't as long as it would have been on the podcast. You guys could also incorporate guests here, which I believe is still a major opportunity to improve on. Credit to Damiani for his recent friend code, by the way. Really good lineup last week. This format allows you to briefly touch on topics that might otherwise be days late on the podcast and or Frame Trap. Again, doesn't need to be a meaty discussion, but this also allows more allies to discuss something especially noteworthy in a given week. While one drawback to the show from a patron standpoint is you can't really do it early access, maybe the compromise here is that patrons at the $5 tier can ask questions for each show. I saw someone suggest on the Easy A subreddit that having Frame Trap go to a weekly show would make a lot of sense as well. I tend to agree, but I realize it's a bigger time commitment for Ben and company. Frame Trap has no plans whatsoever to go every week, even though people would enjoy that. I would enjoy that. It's not to say that wouldn't be enjoyable. It's just not something that we're planning on making happen. I will never say that a daily show is not something that could happen because some ally could step in and do it. I know that's a responsibility I wouldn't want to add to my plate. I certainly, just to put things in perspective, if that was a thing we were doing that I sometimes maybe had to do some morning coming up in the next 2 weeks, that review that I'm working on right now would be canceled. I would just so it's like, that would be one less game that we're covering to do this thing as opposed to something else. And I am not opposed whatsoever to stealing as much content as we possibly can from Kinda Funny. I'm just constantly looking over the hedge at that group, at what they're doing, what works, what doesn't, throw away what doesn't, steal what does, what fits our group, use them as a guinea pigs always. I'm way down. I offer something for you to think about. Asking us to do a daily show is kind of like, or us taking on a daily show is kind of like if, the way Kinda Funny does reviews. So they'll have somebody play a game and then they'll come in and just generally have a conversation about it. So they don't write a script, they don't score games, and they don't cut videos like we do. That's kind of like if we asked them to do that. Like if we were like, hey, well, I'm sure people reach out to Kinda Funny and they're like, your review should be more produced like Easy Allies. At least I hope somebody does. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice if I knew Kinda Funny got pestered every now and then for stuff that we did? Or they were like, hey, I noticed Easy Allies did a thing. You guys should do that too. And Kinda Funny's like, we're doing our own stuff. We don't have time. It's just a different format, a different way of doing things. And generally where my headspace is at now is trying to figure out how to take a week's worth or a work's week of gaming news and turning that into a hour 40 to 2 hour conversation known as the Easy Allies podcast. And then all of our gaming impressions can be factored into Frame Trap. That's kind of where, on a week to 2 week basis, that is where we filter a lot of those ideas. I think that we would definitely have the issue of repeating a lot of the stuff that we typically do on the podcast on a daily show. I do like Cup of Jones in terms of just talking to our patrons and figuring out on a weekly basis kind of what are the concerns, from our community versus what do we have planned. That is my preferred way to start the week. And if we were to do 40 minutes a day to add on to conversations, that I just believe that would, of course, take away from potential conversations that we would have on a group stream, take away from conversations that we would have. And again, just this Q&A be like, yeah, we give another opportunity for people to write in stuff. It's like we do the showcase and Frame Trap and reaction shots and friend code and these Dallas podcasts and group streams and our individual streams. And there's just like so many opportunities. There's so much stuff that we generally do. So we have a thing that we were going to do last week. We're going to do this week. And you'll see that it, has less to do with us getting together to talk about games and taking questions from people to talk about topics and more, creating content that's different than the typical stuff that we do. And so if we had the time to do stuff like this, I would rather have it focused on what is another thing that people request from us a lot, and that is to produce short format content, stuff for our YouTube channel and not necessarily just for our Twitch channel or just for our Patreon. But a daily show, it's in takeaways, an Easy Allies daily show. I will throw that at the group. I just know a weekly Frame Trap and a daily show are not things that the last time were brought up elicited a woohoo from the community, from the allies. Alexander Zirionov, in the last episode, you've said that you don't want to include a topic in the podcast when you feel like it was already fully covered by others and you can't add any value to it. I think that there's value in bringing up any topic because we all have our own communication bubbles, and if all your contacts talk about something, it doesn't really mean that other contacts do the same. Others' contacts do the same. For example, in the last episode, you mentioned Sony's reaction to The Last of Us Part 2 leak, and this was the first time I've heard about that story. This reminds me of the use left joystick to move your character tutorials that may feel unnecessary, but are extremely useful to a few newcomers. I'm not saying that it's your job to educate your audience, but you think that some story is important, and you doubt you can say anything new about it. Try mentioning it during also this week's segment. That's basically where that stuff has been moved. A good example of that, Alexander, is the Last of Us Part 2 demo that went up that I don't feel was worth talking about, which seems different because there were the Ghost of Tsushima thing, but because I had Brad on and it was myself and both of us were really excited about that game, we learned a lot of new stuff about that game. I think it happened like that day or the day before. It's like, yes, this is just perfectly timed for the podcast, whereas Last of Us, like Huber was actively playing the game, and so we had to do that preview, and we had that coming up. And for me, it just kind of solidified a lot of the stuff that I was interested in, but didn't really bring anything new up that I was like, I gotta ask the panel about this. And so when I brought it up in also this week, it was just kind of like, hey, and that happened, and that was cool, and everyone was like, great. That was basically as far, as much as everybody generally wanted to talk about it, outside of the places we had already talked about it. So that's the thing about reactions. Sometimes we have reactions to things, and other people that are on the podcast don't want to be on reactions because they don't want to be spoiled. So even though it seems perfectly timed for the podcast, we might not talk about it because the people on the podcast don't generally want to talk about it. Blood says, every time I'm on Frame Trap, I have to cram in some new games on my backlog. So yeah, Frame Trap sneaks up on you, even though it's every other week. So if we were to do that every week, I wouldn't have anything to talk about. It would come around to me, and Ben would be like, what are you working on, Jones? And I'm like, I felt bad for Ben because in the last Frame Trap I was on, he's like, so during quarantine, you guys have more time to watch stuff and play stuff? And I'm like, nope. Sorry that I can't bounce off that question with a ton of material. Andy Gorgon, I have a lot of fun watching you guys rediscover Sea of Thieves this week. Any chance of more Sea of Thieves in the future? Weekly voyages. Yeah, that would be fun. Although it's tough to tell if Sea of Thieves was really fun because it would make a great weekly thing, or if, again, just knocking out the weekly stuff. The daily stuff and weekly stuff, I won't hear of it. Or if it was fun to watch because it's something that we should do every week, or if it was fun to watch because it had been so long and we were just like, oh, like seeing an old friend, but then if you see that friend every week, you're just like, I don't like that friend as much as I thought I did. There are so many games I would love to play every week. So every time we get like, it was really fun watching you play blank. You should play blank more. It was like, I know, like we had a good time playing. It wouldn't last as long as Sea of Thieves potentially, but we had a good time playing Minecraft Dungeons too. I got my fill of that game. I thought I was going to want to beat that, but I, was playing some Animal Crossing this weekend and put Animal Crossing down, and I'm like, would I want to play that later? I'm trying to think of what I would want to play. And eventually, I'm playing my review game right now, but it's like if I had some extra time. Terrence Karen, I would really like to see more Jess, Sophia, Kind of Funny Guys, especially Greg, Bless, and Tim, or even Game Explain people on shows related to video games, the podcast, or Frame Trap. I know you're always saying that you have to leave it to other allies to decide, but I think without being too pushy, you should mention to them how little, outside of Fiasconauts and Friend Code, we see partnerships or simply friends coming by. Just a thought to add many others who ask for more guests in a time where you're doing all shows from home. So if the schedule is right for them and they're up for it, it's just a Zoom call away. And again, you got to keep that in mind about partnerships and stuff like that, as we have to cater to that other person's schedule as well. Maximilian Dude's has a busy man. He's a hard guy to get sometimes, and so a lot of people are like, you should have him on more stuff. It's like, we agree. But I want to get more people on the podcast. Their schedule, I did have some people that I was just talking to. Their schedules have changed because so many life things have changed the last couple weeks. But that is a goal for me in the immediate future. Varun Kashwaha, do you have any recommendations for non-microtransaction mobile games? How bad is it that I don't? You want? Hey, do you know what I did recently that breaks my heart? Cracked my phone. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see the crack? Look at the crack. Cracked my phone. First time ever. How long have we had iPhones for? Over a decade? Never cracked a phone. I've had a cracked phone because I was in Bora Bora with Amanda and she dropped it. She's like, can I borrow your phone? And then just like immediately dropped it on the floor. I was like, what? But let me go through. I figure this is somewhat of a business thing. Florence I bought, but I have not checked it out. But Florence is supposedly really good. And Kingdom Rush Origins is absolutely fantastic. And I don't believe there's any microtransactions. There might be, but I think you have to buy Kingdom Rush. Everything else I'm playing is hardcore microtransactions right now. Hearthstone microtransactions for sure. Sorry. What's the valley? Monument Valley? Monument Valley 1 and 2. There we go. All about those microtransactions. Ibrahim Sozer, with COVID changing the world, I thought I would recommend that when they ease restrictions that EZA would be ready. For example, the podcast might become a 3-person on the table and 1-person in the booth podcast to ensure a larger gap between each other, or to have someone ready to ensure more people in the podcast. Again, once you get us in that room, it's 4 people versus 3 people. I don't think it's that big of a difference. I think once we're in that room, we're in that room. Group streams to be limited to X amount of people. You could potentially see that. I could see 3-person, so we just don't have like the entire crew in there. I'm sure you could figure out more stuff if you guys started talking about strategies on coming back to the studio, more cleaning duties. Yeah, we talked about all of this. We're not ready to act on all of it, but yeah, we have had discussions, of course. Rebecca Heegard, have you thought about building the studio in Animal Crossing and doing a podcast from there in a similar manner to Animal Talking while stuck at home? If not in a serious manner, it would be fun for an April Fool's joke. Sure. I didn't write that down in takeaways, but I think that's worth a takeaway. Animal Crossing podcast. Maybe like a bit. I don't know about an entire episode. Maybe a bit. I think people would be like, oh, that's fun. And then about halfway through it, they'd be like, they're going the whole time with this, aren't they? Alex Bailey, any update or timeline on EZA merch? I was wearing my original Black Easy Ally shirt out and was asked why I was wearing an old faded out t-shirt in public from a friend. I want to rep EZA, but also want to wear nice shirts. I hear you. We are looking into adding discounts to Spreadshirt. Spreadshirt will be around for a month or so. Sometime this summer. We will be switching over to new merchandise. You will hear about it. We will make a big thing about it. It is coming up. We are now... We were in the design phase for a while. We are now in the wait and announce phase. It's what happens when you work with bigger companies that all have their own schedules, and we're now just like, okay, so we're just hanging out. So yeah, you will not get any updates on us in the coming days, but sometime this summer it will drop and it will be sweet. That's all I'll say about that. Of course, I want to say more. Next Gen Hef. I've recently been playing Clubhouse 51 games with my younger brother, and it's been a blast. I would like to recommend you guys try to stream it, playing 2 to 4 player games if you guys are able to. You could even have your Texas Hold'em game you guys wanted to play. Sure, it's not as good as real Texas Hold'em, but there are some limitations, but it's still fun. We'll definitely put that on the list. That's something that Ian was very excited about. It's just Space Dwarfs for tomorrow night. Space Dwarfs seemed kind of like what we were all in the mood for. Space Dwarfs. But yeah, that is definitely something that the allies are aware of and excited to play. Kif, editorials bother me. The name, it just doesn't have a good ring to it. I was really nervous about this comment. I was like, oh no, really? Oh, okay. I continue. They are the final thing you do in Cup of Jones, and you are essentially the boss of EZA, who also happens to be male. Please rebrand them to the final boss mans. I'm not doing that. So I was nervous when the comment started. I was like, okay. Asbo Sapruder, oh, tell me about it. But if it wasn't easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. Anyway, if Easy Allies were men of distinction, would they be looking for fun, a few laughs, or a good time? I think we're looking for fun, because I think to us, here, let me get right to the point. I think a few laughs and a good time are a part of fun. So that's generally what we're looking for. If we're looking for fun, that's the kind of fun that we like to have, is a few laughs while we're having a good time. So I think generally fun factors into that. I think that's the way that works in my brain. Kerbu. Assuming you intend to continue the quarterly game release preview segment, any thoughts on whether or not you'll preserve Kyle's dichotomy of Pop-Tarts and toaster strudels? Finally, the important question. I told you this episode was going to be serious, that we were going to get to the important stuff. The punch behind that odd pairing and its reactions from the community seemed to be lost without Kyle's support. What are you talking? Lost? It'd honestly be more interested to know what you make of the segment your own if you're okay with bucking traditions. I mean, I've thought about this, but Pop-Tarts and toast strudels. The thing is, I'm in agreement with Kyle. This is one of the rare things that Kyle really and I were on the same page of. Like, I'll eat a toaster strudel. That's the beauty of that dichotomy. It means so much. It seems so silly, but it's so perfect. That you give me a toaster strudel and you're like, oh, okay, this wasn't what I was hoping to get, but this is fine, and like, if you gave me, here's your frosting, okay, well now there's like a step I gotta take to enjoy this. I can't just take the thing and eat it. There's an application here. There's a process of enjoying it. Or you put the frosting on yourself, and therefore I have to deal with the way that you kind of figured out how to handle the whole frosting issue. Whereas you got a Pop-Tart, if you were like, Jones, cold Pop-Tart, I'd be like, great. If you were like, hey, hot Pop-Tart, I was like, fantastic. Great, it's Pop-Tart. So when you look at those lists, you're like, oh, there it is. That's the Pop-Tart right there. That's the sprinkly strawberry Pop-Tart right there. Last of Us Part 2, done. That's the game in June it's my Pop-Tart. Let's go. Whereas toaster strudel is like, yeah, okay. If it was like that toaster strudel ended up being delicious, and it's like, I didn't say it wouldn't be, because toaster strudels can be delicious. It's just me handing the toaster strudel. It's like, wow, okay. Now we need to have a conversation about this. It's ridiculous at the end of the day. Long story short, I have thought about this. I have not come up with something to me that amplifies that better than Pop-Tarts and toaster strudels. I think it's so funny and stupid. And it's such a perfect thing for people like to get angry about. Once we set up a rivalry with MinMax over it, it's over. We got to keep that. Some sort of like breakfast-themed cross Patreon rivalry? It's like, you don't get those every day. You know what I mean? Those are so perfect. And I love to see the Pop-Tarts suck. Chat is alive right now. This is where I want everybody to be. So yeah, good times, but our numbers are dropping. Let's talk about an editorial. Dante's Igloo, Straw Hat Ninja, and Samsa Stormbomb all have opinions about this. Dante's Igloo. Notice that the Patreon is dipped below 40K, and the patron number is just under 8,700. Is this a cause for concern? Straw Hat Ninja. CLS, Colin's Last Stand, is now past you in patrons to become the #1 gaming and nerd culture Patreon in the world. Cheers, Colin. Well done. I was wondering if you lost a lot of patrons because of a combination of Kyle leaving and pandemic, loss of jobs, all of the above. Your content has been a bright spot for me during the week, so I get concerned when you start losing a lot of people. I just want you to know that I will support you guys as long as I'm able. Thank you, Straw Hat Ninja. And finally, Samson Stormbomb. Since the Patreon has been on a steady decline, have the Allies been thinking of a way to boost it? I'm mainly thinking of a Patreon drive or some other big event for when you get back into the office. Unfortunately, Patreon drives have a nasty downside of being easily manipulated with people pledging and then pulling the pledge. All I want is for the Patreon to stay healthy and sustainable. The Patreon is healthy. The Patreon is sustainable. Let me put it that way. I don't think about which is the best Patreon. I don't think about where we are at versus our biggest numbers, because the times they are a-changing, and times have changed a lot in 4 years, not only just with personally with stuff that the allies have been going through, the way our world has been affected, the way our industry has been affected. Crazy to have planned for 2020 where you're like, 2020 is going to be great. Woo! We got these new consoles coming. We got next gen coming. We got all these PS4 exclusives coming. We got, brand new IPs are about to be announced. New Unreal 5's coming out, like all this new awesome stuff. And just like, uh-oh. Whoops. So cheers, everybody. Cheers to everybody that's still a patron of Easy Odds. I am not surprised at all that everybody is having an issue right now with how much money they can give to Patreon, with how much content they can produce themselves as content creators, with what our role is. Just because this is Cup of Jones, I have to let you know, I had a little bit of a nervous breakdown last week because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do with not the business side of this, but just seeing how many people were hurting, seeing how important it was to spread the message about Black Lives Matter, and seeing our company. And I was like, there are so many different ways we could take this. There are so many different things that we can do. We can go silent for a day. We can do a fundraiser. If we do a fundraiser, what do we play? How do we talk? How do we communicate with our audience? How do we handle this in the podcast? How do we handle this just from a company-wide perspective? What do we tell these guys to do? How do we let them express their own opinions about how they feel about these things, but at the same time adhere to some kind of, public Easy Allies community code? My brain just split in half. I mean, it is, and I hesitate to say that because as a white male during the time of Black Lives Matter, I don't want to raise my hand and be like, I am also having problems. It's completely irrelevant. But because this is a business call, because this is a business meeting, I have arrived at a lot of different places in terms of where are we? What should we be doing? And I think that is part of the reason why you're not seeing a major initiative from Easy Allies in terms of what the next 6 months are going to be like. We've seen people being like, okay, they're starting to, I just went and got a haircut the other day. I just went to my favorite restaurant and finally ate there. It looks like things are changing. What does that mean for Easy Allies? Doesn't mean anything because we don't sell widgets. We don't make food. We don't have a restaurant. There are no seats that we sell at Easy Allies. They're virtual seats that we sell via our Patreon. So we can still do our jobs as safely as possible. But at the same time with just, besides the point of actually being in a studio together and being close together and what that means in terms of the possibilities of spreading COVID, what it means to just have another reason to go out into this world, to actually just kind of brave the insanity of going out there and potentially being around people. I was talking with my parents in terms of like us being safe. And it's like, we think you're safe and you think we're safe, but like, we just don't know at the end of the day. Went to go visit a friend of mine and we just hung out in the front yard and talked. And I felt bad because like, this is a friend I've had for years. I would trust with my life. Yeah, we still had masks on because who the hell knows? It's tough to, I trust these allies with so much. They're my partners in crime, my co-founders, my business partners, my brothers. But who the hell knows? I don't know. I still don't know where any of those suckers have been. I don't know, potentially if they are carriers, what that means for, possible ways that could affect my life from not only myself getting sick and not being able to raise my child or potentially do things with this business, but getting my son sick, getting my parents sick who are, in their mid to late 70s. And so because you haven't had that big swing from us, because you haven't had some big, like, okay, forget everything else you've heard about game stuff being delayed and, you feeling the need to be socially active and seeing protests and hearing about potential rioting and thinking about potentially being a part of protests or making your voice heard or echoing other sentiments that you see online. Here's what we're up to at Easy Allies. It doesn't seem like the right time for it. It doesn't seem like a smart time for it. It seems like any sort of effort. And maybe this is just kind of a rippling effect or an echoing effect from us doing EasyX, from us planning this giant event that we spent a lot of resources, that our community spent a lot of resources, that we really wanted to be a snapshot of where our community was, the size of our community, the involvement of our community, and to see our community, and see us and interacting with our community. We wanted it to be very meta. Didn't happen at all in the way that we had originally planned for it to happen. And doing it the only way that we could very early on in this pandemic made us acutely aware of our restrictions. I just finally managed to buy Ben a new mic, the mic that I use, so that Frame Trap can sound a little bit better. And so we are still, working through the restrictions that are put into place, in not only just in the world, but specifically in Southern California and LA County, in terms of what we have access to and what we're capable to do with our resources. And so even doing something like this fun announcement that we have this week, a new thing that we can introduce to you that was produced during this pandemic, all of that is done, on our tippy toes. All of that is done just knowing that, there might be a lot of mistakes here. There might be a lot of things we can learn from this. Even that first tweet that we did last week that a lot of people reached out to us. I have friends that are, African-American. I have friends that are much more socially active than I am, that protest a lot more, that are, much more involved in politics, that gave us some notes, that reached out to me that were just like, hey, Blood saying woo. I don't know what he's saying woo to. That said, hey, I would maybe reword it, or I would say something, or here's something else to keep in mind of, and that factors into a lot of the listening we keep hearing and trying to express that, especially for myself as a white male, it's what I need to spend the majority of my time doing right now. And reading articles, reading books, hearing people's stories, watching videos, trying to get as much information. I've just been an absolute information hound in terms of, seeing other. That's why I've been obsessed. Why we talked about it on the podcast. Like every time a company's like, all right, here's our message, I read that thing 500 times because it's so fascinating to me. People trying to distill. It's like when you have a friend that lost somebody, that goes through losing a family member or a friend or a loved one. And it's like, you have this feeling like, what the hell do I tell that person? There's nothing I could do right now that would be proactive, that would make them feel better. And that just being a part of it, that just showing that you're there is effective. But obviously in all of these instances, you want to not say something that does not reflect how you feel. And so it's tough, that ebb and flow. When is it a better time to listen? When is it a better time to speak and take action? And so you will see us taking action about certain things. You will see baby steps from Easy Allies in terms of testing things. But considering we don't know when we're going back to the studio, we don't know how long, we'll have to, go off of these resources that we already have, that we are producing. Not to mention, we completely changed up our sponsorship and how all of that income works, and working with, different companies, and a company like Rooster Teeth, which has been in the headlines for completely different reasons than, the business that we did with them. And so I'm trying to read up on as much of that as is happening. So there's a lot going on, and there are a lot of contributing factors to why people are deciding not to invest in much as at Easy Allies. We have had exit surveys of people that do not agree with our political, wouldn't necessarily call them affiliations, because a lot of us, if not all of us, believe that the things that we are talking about right now are civil rights issues. They're humanitarian issues, not necessarily. I don't feel that there should be a political divide on people should not be racist. Cops should not murder people. But there are people that are just frustrated, didn't bring it up, but had a comment. Didn't want to single the person out, because I want those voices. I want those people to feel that they have a platform and that they are welcome to let me know those things. But I had one person, I think still a patron, obviously, from leaving a comment, but just said, I'm disappointed that Easy Allies is saying anything political at all. I understand that it does affect business. I tried to keep the podcast discussion focused on the business of gaming. But we have, long story short, we have lost patrons because we, talked about racism. We have had people leave. We had people leave because the pandemic forced them into a financial situation that is unavoidable for them. We have had people leave because they don't feel that there's anything new. And in a lot of instances, they're not wrong. In a lot of instances, we are trying to produce the stuff that we would have generally produced, that we know we can produce: reviews, event coverage, reactions, stuff like that. Our general slew of podcasts and weekly and monthly shows that we do, our Patreon-focused rewards. We are really focused on making sure that stuff happens, that we do not fall back on any of the promises we've already made beyond doing extra stuff, which is why it was such a bummer delaying this extra thing that we we're very excited to show all of you. And so it's all of those things, and it's all of those reasons why when we observe these changes happening, when we observe that Patreon count going down, and we observe the our total going down, our Patreon total, when we let someone as hardworking as Colin Moriarty, advance us. I know Colin was just lamenting a couple of months back. He was like, "Easy Allies." He's like, "I'm almost there." All these people are working hard. In our YouTube subs as well. We're creeping up on some other people as well. I'm just saying, our YouTube sub number is doing very well considering what kind of an entity that we are. All of those things are observed as much as I observe anything else. As much as I observe companies losing money because they can't open because of this pandemic. People I know that are losing jobs, all of these things that, medical officials that are overworked, just a lot of these things that are going to continue to happen as we get through a very difficult time. And we are observing them. We will hopefully try to help you understand where we were going moving forward. Again, a lot of that is just to provide stability for ourselves and for our company by ensuring that we are going to deliver the things that we promised to deliver, to be very vocal and obvious about those things. So it's got to be frustrating as somebody who not only wants to invest in a month of Easy Allies, but wants to invest in Easy Allies for the future. Where is that future going? What plans do we have? There are a lot of things that we talked about in our January meeting. There were a couple of things I wanted to do with Kyle before he left. A couple shows that we were going to work on together that hopefully will still happen, but just so many circumstances changed, around Kyle leaving that he had a lot of other things, to focus on and worry about. And so 2020 is not at all working out the way that we had planned. And I am more than happy to settle on a 2020 where all of us keep our jobs and all of us keep producing content for all of you, and all of you stay engaged in the way that is comfortable for you. I don't want any of you to feel guilty from dropping a tier or dropping out of our Patreon completely, or, having to get a job or a second job and, you feeling like, hey, almost all the time I see people on Cup of Jones before I go live where they're like, well, I haven't seen a live episode in a really long time. I've just been really busy. Or, yeah, I've been kind of tuned out of Cup of Jones, or tuned out of the messages that Easy Allies delivers on a weekly basis. And thank you for being involved as much as you can. I think for a lot of reasons, that's why our fundraisers are very successful whenever we do have them, if we don't have them on a somewhat regular basis, because we have people involved in our community. They're like, I can't justify, supporting you every single week because I'm not that engaged in Easy Allies content. But every now and then I see you stand up for with beliefs that I am aligned with, or, for a cause that I think is just and appropriate, and I want to be involved in that. And so you have people coming in, just boom, $500, and then they're gone. And so, we want to be as involved with our community as we possibly can. These are just trying times for everybody. And I hope all of you are doing the best that you can out there. I hope all of you are well, and I hope all of you are not feeling any pressure from, trying to help us back up. If we put in more tiers on our shout out tier, don't feel the need to kind of correct a wrong that you see being done, in the Easy Allies Patreon, that there will be a time and a place to produce content, as good, if not better, than the stuff that we were producing previously in the studio. That this is a very different time, that while it does cater very perfectly to the type of content that we, originally were producing at Easy Allies, that we can do group streams from home, that we can do podcasts via Zoom. But at the same time, we're all just trying to hunker down and get through this, and then really focus our efforts and energy back when we are doing the stuff that we used to do before, are kind of back at the point where we were. Hopefully, we might not never get exactly back there, but closer to the spot where we were in February and March, before we were forced to change up how Easy Allies produces the stuff. And everyone's talking about Sony, I guess, is bringing up Sony is giving us a date. See, times are changing. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around with Easy Allies. Thank you to everybody for continuing this conversation. This was really great. This was one Cup of Jones where I definitely felt I sent a lot out to our community. A lot of people reacted on that. So thank you to people who replied to things that I said last week that I did not bring up because they weren't necessarily question focused. But again, I appreciate any and all comments. I try to leave a heart on or a reply to everybody that I will not address specifically on Cup of Jones, but just want to say thank you for that sentiment. Thank you for letting me know that there were random pops in this last week's podcast, or that you like the way I did one particular segment, or there are ways that we can generally improve the stuff that we do at Easy Allies. It's going to be a busy week. We're going to be live a lot this week, so we will see you all on Twitch. And apologies for not doing Island Hop again this week. I will hopefully find a good time. Hopefully Saturday is nice and free the week after that. If not, I will certainly not be comfortable doing 3 weeks with no Island Hop. I will try to figure out a time to squeeze that in there, because I miss going to y'all's islands. Yeah, stay tuned for stuff from Easy Allies. And new show coming this week. I hope you all enjoy it. Love you all. Hope you're all safe. Cheers.